Watch it, old man. One of the teenagers snarled, deliberately bumping into 90-year-old James Carter, sending him stumbling off the curb and into the busy street. Horns blared. James, a decorated veteran of 3 wars, caught his balance just in time, his heart pounding not from fear but from a sudden, cold rage. The teens just laughed, high-fiving as they swaggered off. 20 minutes later, as they congratulated themselves in a nearby alley, the entrance was suddenly blocked by 2 imposing figures in Marine Corps dress blues, followed by the distinct, disciplined sound of marching boots. If you believe respect for elders, especially our veterans, is non-negotiable, type honor below. James Carter had lived 90 years, and most of them had been dedicated to service. He'd enlisted as a boy, lying about his age to fight in World War II, then stayed in, serving through Korea and 1 tour in Vietnam before finally retiring as a master gunnery sergeant in the United States Marine Corps. His small apartment was filled with carefully preserved mementos, faded photographs, service commendations, a shadow box displaying his medals he never wore but cherished as reminders of the men he'd fought alongside and the sacrifices made. His body was frail now, his steps slow and aided by a simple wooden cane, but his eyes still held the clear, direct gaze of a man who had faced down death and never blinked. He lived a quiet life, mostly keeping to himself, his days punctuated by walks to the local park and visits to the library. He didn't ask for much, just a little peace, a little respect. He was on his usual afternoon walk, heading toward the bakery for his weekly treat, a single eclair, when he encountered the group of teenagers. They were a familiar sight in the neighborhood, a pack of 4 or 5 youths, usually found loitering, their boredom often manifesting as petty vandalism or casual intimidation of passers-by. James usually gave them a wide berth, not out of fear, but to avoid unnecessary confrontation. Today, however, they were blocking the narrow sidewalk outside the bakery, sprawled across a bench, their legs stretched out, forcing pedestrians to step into the gutter. James approached, intending to politely ask them to make way. "Excuse me, lads," he began, his voice a little raspy with age. "Could I trouble you to let an old soldier pass?" The apparent leader of the group, a tall youth with a sneering expression and a backward baseball cap, looked James up and down with contempt. "Old soldier, huh? What are you, 100? His companions snickered. "Just trying to get to the bakery," James said, ignoring the jibe, his hand resting on the head of his cane. "If you wouldn't mind." "Mind?" the leader echoed mockingly. "Yeah, I think we do mind. This is our bench, Grandpa. Find another route." He deliberately stretched his legs further, completely blocking the path. Another teen chimed in, "Yeah, maybe you should just go home and take a nap before you fall over." James felt a familiar stirring of disciplined anger, the kind he hadn't felt in years, but he kept his voice level. "There's no need for rudeness, son. Just asking for a little courtesy." "Courtesy?" the leader scoffed. He stood up, towering over James, clearly intending to intimidate. "You want courtesy? Maybe you should show some respect to your betters." Then he did something utterly unexpected and wantonly cruel. As James tried to step around him, the teen deliberately stuck out his foot, tripping the old man while simultaneously giving him a hard shove on the shoulder. "Watch it, old man," he snarled. James, his balance lost, stumbled precariously off the high curb, his cane flying from his grasp. He landed heavily but thankfully upright in the path of oncoming traffic. Horns blared furiously, a car swerved violently to avoid him. James, his heart hammering, scrambled back toward the curb, his old reflexes surprisingly sharp. The teenagers just roared with laughter, pointing, finding the near tragedy hilarious. "Look at him dance," one shouted. "Maybe he learned that in the war." They high-fived each other, then, seeing a few angry glares from other pedestrians who had witnessed the event, sauntered off down a nearby alleyway, still chuckling, leaving James shaken and humiliated on the edge of the busy street. A kind woman rushed forward to help James retrieve his cane and ensure he was all right. "Those dreadful boys," she exclaimed. "Are you hurt, dear?" James, though his hip ached from the stumble and his dignity was severely bruised, managed a shaky smile. "Just startled, ma'am. Thank you for your kindness." He brushed himself off, his hands trembling slightly. The casual cruelty, the utter lack of respect, cut deeper than any physical ache. He had faced enemy soldiers who showed more honor than those boys. He picked up his cane, the laughter of the departing teens still echoing in his ears. He decided against the éclair, his appetite was gone. He just wanted to go home. But as he turned to leave, something stopped him. Not just the pain in his hip, but a deeper, older instinct. He was a Marine. Marines didn't just walk away from an unprovoked assault. Not even at 90. He wouldn't confront them himself, his fighting days were long over, but there were other ways. He knew the neighborhood. He knew the alley they disappeared into led to a dead end, a small enclosed courtyard behind a derelict warehouse, a favorite hangout for local troublemakers. He also remembered something else. The local Marine Corps recruiting station was only 2 blocks away. And the gunnery sergeant in charge, a young, hard-as-nails Marine named Sergeant Major Dawson, had a particular soft spot for old vets from his beloved Corps, especially World War II and Korean War-era heroes. James had met him once at a VFW event. He fumbled for his old, simple cell phone. He didn't have Dawson's direct number, but he had the main recruiting station line. He dialed, his fingers surprisingly steady now, a cold resolve settling in. Marine Corps recruiting. Sergeant Hayes speaking. "How can I help you?" "Sergeant Hayes," James said, his voice low but clear. "This is Master Gunnery Sergeant James Carter, retired. I need to speak with Sergeant Major Dawson. It's a matter of immediate concern regarding disrespect shown to the uniform and an assault on an elderly Marine." A brief pause. Then Sergeant Hayes's voice sharpened. "Master Gunnery Sergeant, stand by. Connecting you now." The phone clicked. Then Sergeant Major Dawson's voice, rough and direct, came on the line. "Dawson here." "Who's this?" "Sergeant Major, it's James Carter." "Master Gunnery Sergeant, retired." "Master Gunnery Sergeant Carter, sir. What can I do for you?" The respect in Dawson's voice was instantaneous and absolute. James quickly, factually recounted what had just happened, the blocked sidewalk, the insults, the deliberate shove into traffic, the teenagers currently holed up in the dead-end alley. He didn't embellish. Didn't ask for retribution. Just stated the facts. "They disrespected the Corps, Sergeant Major," James finished quietly. "And they put one of its own in harm's way for a cheap laugh." A moment of dead silence. Then Dawson spoke, his voice like ice. "Master Gunnery Sergeant, are you injured, sir?" "Shaken. A bit bruised. But functional." "Understood. Elman and 3rd, you said? The alley behind the packing plant? How many of them?" 4 or 5. "Young, mid-teens, I'd guess." "Consider it handled, Master Gunnery Sergeant." Dawson's voice tightened with controlled fury. "Stay clear of that alley. We'll counsel them Marine Corps style." The line went dead. James knew what Marine Corps style counseling likely entailed, especially when delivered by a motivated sergeant major and his young, eager recruits. He found a bench with a view of the alley entrance from a safe distance, sat down, and waited. He didn't have to wait long. Less than 10 minutes later, the quiet street was suddenly, almost surreally, filled with the sight of Marines. Not in combat gear, but some in their crisp service Charlies, others in utility uniforms. Dawson, looking like a coiled spring, led a group of about 8 Marines, a mix of recruiters and young pools waiting for boot camp who clearly looked up to him. They moved with the disciplined speed and purpose that was the hallmark of the Corps, not running, but covering ground with intimidating efficiency. They didn't make a sound. The group reached the mouth of a narrow alleyway. Dawson held up a hand, and they fanned out, 2 taking positions to block any escape from the alley's entrance, their expressions grim, their posture radiating unshakable authority. The other 6, led by Dawson, turned and disappeared into the dim confines of the alley. James, watching from his bench, couldn't see what was happening inside, but he could hear. the abrupt cessation of the teenagers' loud chatter and laughter. A sudden, shocked silence. Then, after a moment, Dawson's voice. Not shouting, but carrying clearly, each word laced with cold, hard authority. James couldn't make out the exact words, but the tone was unmistakable, the tone of a drill instructor dressing down a particularly witless recruit. A tone that promised swift, unambiguous, and deeply unpleasant consequences for disrespect and stupidity. There were no sounds of physical violence, just that relentless, controlled verbal barrage. After what felt like an eternity, but was probably only about 5 or 6 minutes, Dawson's voice stopped. Then another Marine's voice started, equally firm, perhaps explaining some finer points of respect for elders, for veterans, for the community. More silence. Then the group of teenagers stumbled out of the alley, one by one. They looked utterly different from the arrogant youths who had swaggered in. Their faces were pale. Some looked like they were about to cry. Their earlier bravado was completely extinguished, replaced by a look of profound, shell-shocked terror. They didn't run. They walked, almost crept, out of the alley, avoiding eye contact with anyone, and scurried away down the street as fast as their trembling legs could carry them, looking back over their shoulders as if expecting the wrath of God himself to descend. Dawson and his Marines emerged from the alley, their expressions still stern but with a hint of grim satisfaction. Dawson spotted James on the bench, strode over, and snapped to a perfect salute. "Master Gunnery Sergeant Carter, sir. The situation has been addressed. Those young men have received a thorough orientation on the core values of honor, courage, and commitment, with a particular emphasis on respecting their elders and those who have served." James slowly rose, returning the salute with a steadiness that surprised him. "Thank you, Sergeant Major. And thank your Marines for me." "No thanks necessary, Master Gunnery Sergeant," Dawson replied, his eyes still hard. "We take care of our own. Always. And we don't tolerate disrespect to the Corps, or those who built its legacy." He paused. "Are you sure you're all right, sir? Need a ride anywhere? Medical attention?" "I'm fine, Sergeant Major," James said, a small, genuine smile finally touching his lips. "You and your men have already provided the best medicine." Dawson nodded, then turned to his Marines. "All right, Leathernecks. Fall in. Back to the station, and good work." The Marines formed up, executed a smart about-face, and marched away with the same disciplined efficiency they had arrived with, leaving the street quiet once more, but fundamentally changed. James watched them go, a warmth spreading through his chest that had nothing to do with the weather. He felt seen. Respected. Not like a burden or an invisible old man, but like a Marine. He even felt up to getting that éclair now. The story of the Marine intervention in the alley became a neighborhood legend, whispered with a mixture of awe and amusement. The group of teenagers who had been counseled were reportedly models of politeness for weeks afterward, giving wide berth to anyone over the age of 60 and developing a sudden, profound respect for military insignia. James Carter continued his quiet walks, but now, when he passed the Marine recruiting station, there was always a crisp salute from whoever was on duty, and a shared nod of understanding. Because the Marine Corps ethos doesn't fade with age or wither with hardship. It endures. And when one of their own is disrespected, the response, even if it's just a few good Marines counseling some errant youths in an alley, is swift, decisive, and unforgettable. Some lines, you just don't cross. Ever. Semper Fidelis. Subscribe if you believe that the bond between those who served is unbreakable, and that respect for our veterans is a sacred duty.